Lights flickered across the rooftop as I saw my father pour a fine white powder into my champagne. His hand was steady, his smile perfectly calm. No one seemed to notice. Not the orchestra, not the guests, not even my sister beside me, reaching for her drink. I held the glass, its warmth seeping into my palm, pretending the fracture inside me didn't exist. They expected me to swallow it quietly, like every other invisible wound in this family. But instead I raised the flute, returned his smile and made a choice. People would later ask when everything truly began. For me it started the moment I refused that drink. I grew up in a house where silence carried more weight than praise. Walls displayed Ava's accolades, gleaming trophies, certificates, photos with judges and mentors, while mine lingered lower, smaller, slightly askew, as if the house itself understood hierarchy. At 12, I won the state science fair for a project crafted on the kitchen floor in the middle of the night. I tested creek water samples, mapped chemical runoff on poster board. When the ribbon arrived, I carried it proudly into the dining room. Victor didn't look up from his tablet. Helena scanned the newspaper. Ava was already dressed for debate, her hair pinned exactly as Mother liked. "That's expected," Victor muttered. "A heiress should excel. Expected, not celebrated." Helena glanced at the ribbon only to comment on my hair. "Next time stand straighter. Cameras notice everything." That night, Ava's trophy claimed the center shelf. My ribbon was tucked behind a photo of her in her tennis uniform, half hidden, gathering dust. The pattern never shifted. Holidays revolved around Ava's achievements, GPA announcements, internship celebrations, her acceptance to a top business school. My wins were footnotes, logistical updates with no applause required. When I declared I wanted to study environmental science, the house tilted. Victor called it a waste. Helena warned no one serious pursued a career with no future. Ava lingered silently, eyes soft but powerless. I learned early that empathy without action still feels like neglect. The summer before college, I interned with an environmental nonprofit instead of the family business. At breakfast, Victor read my email declining their offer. He set down his spoon with exaggerated care. "If you insist on embarrassing this family," he said, "you'll bear the cost." I nodded, went upstairs, and submitted my student loan forms. My room felt calm, almost approving, as if it knew I had finally claimed a truth. The night before leaving, Helena folded my clothes with the precision reserved for Ava's business trips. No words, no hugs, no glances. Just a quiet tug on a loose sleeve thread. Her expression a blade wrapped in civility. Looking back, it's all clear. The empty seats at my milestones, the conversations that passed me by, the constant reminder that I existed as a shadow in a house built for someone else. That was when I learned my place. The hallway behind the rooftop kitchen was narrow, dim, smelling of citrus cleaner and overheated metal. I'd gone there because the main restroom line stretched past the bar. I froze when I heard my parents' voices, low, clipped, urgent. "She can't have access to that trust," Helena whispered. "Not while everything's unstable." "It activates next week," Victor replied. "If she gains independence, she could expose the waste, the reports, the samples. You know the consequences." A pause. His voice lowered. "If she's hospitalized even briefly, the transfer stalls. If something worse happens before it clears." Helena inhaled sharply. "Victor, it's precision," he said. "A controlled setback. Nothing lethal unless she reacts poorly. We just need time." My fingers tightened on the restroom handle. My chest burned slowly, methodically, like my body trying to protect me from snapping. They weren't discussing punishment, they were planning around me. I stepped back, the hallway suddenly colder, as if the house itself had turned away. Back on the rooftop, the party was a blur of strings and laughter. Guests toasted to futures they couldn't see. Helena's smile was perfect, her eyes scanning for flaws. Victor stood at the champagne table, speaking to the head waiter in a voice tinged with pride. I watched him select one glass. The tilt, the slight swirl of powder settling at the bottom, invisible to all but me. He set it down carefully and stepped away. Ava appeared beside me, brushing hair from her face, laughing at a cousin's joke. She didn't notice Victor's gaze tighten toward me. I reached for the glass meant for me, stopped and smiled, the kind of smile that looks effortless in photos. "Here," I said, offering it to Ava. Mine's the better pour. She took it without question, clinking her glass to mine. I felt nothing, no shock, no triumph. Only a steady certainty settling into my bones. The moment had begun. When Ava's knees buckled, the ripples traveled slowly. A gasp near the orchestra, the clatter of silverware, the dull thud of her glass on stone. I reached her to see her skin pale, her breath shallow. Victor pushed forward, calling her name with urgency he never reserved for me. Helena's hands trembled as she smoothed her hair, disbelief cracking her voice. I knelt beside her, steady because I had to. "We need an ambulance," I said. No one argued. In the service elevator, Ava's head rested on my shoulder, her pulse irregular under my touch. I didn't think about the powder yet. I counted the beeping lights, the hum of machinery, and kept my breathing slow. Her glass. My glass. The subtle swap. The powder settling into the golden liquid. Choices made in a single heartbeat don't vanish just because the room shifts around you. In the ambulance bay, paramedics lifted her from my arms, wheeling her beneath harsh fluorescent lights that sharpened every edge. Helena followed, her voice tight with questions. Victor stayed behind, hands gripping the railing like the building itself might tip. "You switched the glasses," he said without looking at me. I didn't answer. Silence was safer. Inside the ER, monitors beeped unevenly. Nurses moved with practiced precision. Dr. Shaw examined Ava with calm urgency, leaving no space for panic. She collapsed. Any pre-existing conditions? Symptoms escalated quickly. Confusion, tremors, unstable heart rate. His gaze narrowed, instincts alert to something beneath the surface. "This looks like exposure to an anticholinergic compound," he muttered under his breath. My throat tightened. "Check for research-grade derivatives," I said quietly. "Not commercial formulations." He paused. "Why?" "Because the man standing nearby had access to chemicals no outsider should ever handle. Because I had seen him pour powder into a glass with practiced ease." But I said nothing aloud. "Just check," I repeated. He nodded, already issuing orders. Detective Hall arrived 20 minutes later, notebook in hand. At first, his questions were routine, procedural, but when he asked what triggered Ava's symptoms, I motioned to Nina and Jenna, both pale from witnessing it all. Nina handed over her phone. The video played silently. Victor choosing the glass, the powder drifting, me smiling and switching glasses, lifting a safe flute to my lips while Ava drank. Detective Hall rewound, watched it twice more, his expression tightening. "I'll need copies of all recordings," he said. "They're already in your inbox," Jenna replied. They hadn't been asked, they just understood. As they walked away with the detective, I sank into a vinyl chair, its cold surface grounding me. The sanitized air smelled faintly of chemicals. A vending machine hummed softly nearby. Neutral, predictable, safe. Victor and Helena sat across from me. He stared at the floor. She watched the entrance to Ava's room. "You misunderstand," Helena whispered eventually, voice thin. I didn't reply. "We would never harm our family," she said louder, as if volume made it true. I remained silent. Dr. Carter approached, concern written across his face. At the party, he had congratulated me with a softness I wasn't used to. Now he regarded me like he had pieced something together he wished he hadn't. "I heard what happened. If there's anything you can do." "There is," I said. "But it's already in the hands of people who can act." He nodded slowly, understanding more than I said. Hours passed. Tests ran. Samples processed. More detectives arrived. Agent Brooks from the Federal Environmental Division arrived with quiet authority, shifting the air around him. He reviewed the video, requested internal documents, access logs. I provided facts, nothing more. By dawn, Ava stabilized, groggy, confused, alive. I stayed at her bedside as her eyelids fluttered open. "It wasn't meant to be you," I whispered. Her brows knit slightly. I didn't explain that the compound was still in her system. Truth could wait. Back in the waiting room, the city woke around me. I pulled my bag onto my lap, began the work I'd deferred for years. Dates, shipments, memos, photos, lab reports, everything I'd gathered, sorted into neat folders. Research, environment, trust, corporate missteps, family directives. Truth stacked neatly. I drafted a message to Claire, the attorney I'd contacted weeks ago. Sent it without hesitation. Closed tabs tied to my family. Opened new ones tied to my future. Scheduled a meeting with investigators. Encrypted everything. Severed old access points. Sunrise passed. The waiting room emptied except for cleaning staff. Finally, stretching stiff shoulders, the weight of years felt lighter. Not gone, just no longer forced upon me. I glanced at the corridor where my parents conferred with their lawyer. Small, contained, manageable. For the first time, they weren't the center of the frame. Outside, morning air was cool, whispering, "This time I won't fix what they broke." By midday, the hospital hummed with controlled investigation. Officers guarded Ava's room. Detectives spoke quietly near the nurse's station. Agent Brooks reviewed toxicology results, his focus cutting through everything else. Dr. Shaw approached, chart in hand, expression steady but tense. "The results are in," he said. "Your sister was exposed to a modified anticholinergic compound. Research grade. Not commercially available." The room narrowed, light humming, everything else fading. "We've reviewed similar compounds," Agent Brooks added. "From labs tied to your family's company." Victor and Helena stiffened. Detective Hall tapped his pen. "We'll need statements from everyone." Victor squared his shoulders, authority slipping back into place. "This is absurd," he began. "Ava must have reacted to food or alcohol. Our family has no history of." Detective Hall turned the tablet. The video of the toast played silently. Victor selecting the glass, the powder settling, the stem in his hand. I watched as I swapped the flutes, Ava raising hers to drink. It was the cleanest evidence I'd ever held, quiet, precise, undeniable. Victor's face paled. His mouth moved, opened and closed, but no words came. A man who had always controlled every narrative now confronted one he could not manipulate. "She drank what was meant for me," I said, stating only fact, no accusation, no heat, just placing it plainly on the table. Helena rose as if pulled upright by invisible strings. "You don't understand," she whispered. "We were protecting the family. Everything was unraveling, the investigation, the records. If those documents became public. So slowing me down was part of that?" I asked. Her silence spoke louder than any explanation. Agent Brooks flipped through lab access logs. "Mr. Harris signed out the compound 3 days before graduation. We've traced a storage unit tied to forged signatures, research samples, falsified disposal records, all pointing to an attempt to shift responsibility." Victor shot Helena a glare sharp enough to cut steel. "You should have kept quiet." She flinched. Detective Hall snapped his notebook closed. "Both of you will be taken into custody pending formal charges." 2 officers stepped forward. Metal clicked. Ava, still fragile, watched from the doorway of her room. Her eyes, swollen but clear, took in our parents as they were led away, silent strangers she had grown up with. Victor turned to me. "You did this." "No," I said softly. "You did," he insisted. Helena reached out to Ava with shaking hands. "Sweetheart, please." Ava stepped back. No words were needed. The distance itself delivered judgment. As officers escorted them away, the hallway seemed wider, the air freer. No triumph, no gloating. Just open space where their shadows had loomed. Agent Brooks handed me a card. "We'll need your cooperation moving forward." "You'll have it," I said. He nodded once. "Justice starts with clarity. You've provided that." Alone, I sank into a chair outside Ava's room. Morning light slanted through blinds, painting stripes across the floor as if the world itself had shifted quietly while we weren't looking. Ava joined me moments later, her hand finding mine with a steadiness her legs hadn't yet regained. "Is it over?" she whispered. "No," I said. "But it's beginning." The lake house was quieter than memory allowed, more silent than anywhere had a right to be. Mornings unfolded slowly. Mist, pale light, then the shoreline emerging in increments. I wrapped my hands around a warm mug, letting the cold seep through the steps, grounding me. Ava moved cautiously at first, regaining the strength the compound had stolen. Sometimes I heard her pacing upstairs, the floorboards creaking in rhythm with her breaths. Sometimes she joined me outside, draped in a sweater, gazing at the water in silence. Gone were the crisp business blouses. Her hair fell in loose waves, free of Helena's exacting touch. She looked like someone shedding a costume she hadn't realized she'd been wearing. My days found new rhythm. I worked remotely with an environmental restoration group, drafting impact reports, analyzing chemical footprints, designing remediation plans, using the knowledge my family had tried to bury for years. There was satisfaction in restoration instead of concealment. Occasionally, federal updates arrived. Seized accounts, soil remediation progress, interviews with former employees finally willing to speak. I read each slowly without fanfare. Closure was quiet, methodical, administrative. One evening, I walked the narrow path behind the house. Leaves cracked underfoot. The lake mirrored the final red sliver of sun. I paused at the dock, inhaling cold water and pine. My reflection looked calmer than expected, older yet lighter. The rooftop party felt like a distant film. Glass, powder, choice. Every moment still vivid, but urgency had faded, replaced by release. Not forgiveness, not victory, just freedom. Inside, Ava sat at the kitchen table, sorting law school papers. She looked up and offered a tired but genuine smile, the first in months that carried no fear. "There's still a lot ahead," she said. "I know, but it feels different now." "It does." A breeze lifted a notebook page. She pressed it down, hand steady. We sat quietly, listening to the kind of silence that asks nothing, hides nothing, the kind finally ours. I had thought survival meant shrinking, folding myself into shapes that kept peace. Standing on the dock, lake at my feet, I understood. Distance is not abandonment. It is recovery. Truth doesn't need witnesses. It simply needs room to exist. My family had taught me silence could wound. Life showed me it could heal. Somewhere in between, I found a boundary that held. The life ahead isn't loud. It isn't triumphant. It is mine. And finally, that is enough.